Welcome to the Business Grind, where we give you an inside perspective on what it takes to start, build, and run a successful business. Here are your hosts, Danny Shaw and Sean Michael Wellington.
All right. Hello to everyone in podcast land today. Thanks for joining us. Sean, how are you feeling?
Feeling good this week and ready for another interview. It's been a while since we had a guest, so it'll be good, a little change of pace.
Indeed. All right. So we have Mr. Maurice Cherry on the show today. I feel like I need take a deep breath to speak on everything that Maurice does. But, just for the uninitiated, Maurice is a designer, strategist, and podcaster located in Atlanta, Georgia. Digital creator. He's well known for, his Revision Path podcast, award-winning podcast, actually, which is the first podcast to be added to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, amongst many other projects that Maurice has been included in and has spearheaded throughout his career, which we'll get into today. Maurice, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. I tried to keep it short, but I know I probably didn't even do as much justice to everything that you have touched or been involved in. So if you don't mind, maybe just giving a little bit more color and context to all that you do.
No, you're good. I the creative director and principal at my own studio called Lunch.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I've founded back in 2008. I also have a production company that I co-own called Cultural Algorithms. Lunch, the studio that most people know of, that's where Revision Path sort of comes out of. It's one of the projects that I do through my studio. And then Cultural Algorithms, we started roughly in about, I think 2019, 2020, like right around the beginning of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a company that I co-own with my friend Tori Hargrove, who works at Meta. And we are, I think, going to be close to releasing our first production from Cultural Algorithms pretty soon.
And with all these projects and initiatives and things that you have done over the years, I guess we can just kind of jump right into it, right? Like, how did you get started, right?
And just to piggyback off of that, sorry to cut you off, Maurice, but I want to know kind of how did you get started, but maybe finish off with like what's your main source of income right now out of all the things you do?
Oh, well, I'm unemployed now, so my main source of income is from the government. No, that's real.
It's real. I'm not laughing because it's like, wow, but I think
I just got laid off a month ago, and so I'm currently kind of in the job market looking, but until I find something,
right,
living on unemployment.
No, oh man, that's real, because this show is about showing the real behind the entrepreneur experience and the grind behind the scenes, right? It's not all glitz and glam, and everyone isn't, giving advice on how to take your LLC to the next level in 20 seconds or less. So this is real stuff. So definitely appreciate out the gate just coming with the real, right?
Yeah, I mean that's where my main source of income is. But I have the podcast, so we have revenue through the show, through our job board, as well as through sponsorships and advertising. And I've got savings and stuff like that. But in terms of regular income that's coming in, that's pretty much it. Oh wait, no, I work part-time for a publishing company called A Book Apart. I work as a development editor.
Oh, okay.
So I do get paid from that as well. But I usually try to have more than one stream of income in general, whether I have a 9-to-5 or not. But the main thing right now is unemployment.
And you also mentioned how you're monetizing the podcast. I mean, I don't want to jump around too much. It may be hard with such an eclectic person, but I just want to deep dive on that a little bit. Like, I feel like a lot of people are struggling to monetize the podcast. It's a flashy thing now where people want to jump and do it, but not very many people know the monetization strategy. So can you tell us a little bit about that maybe before we dive into some of the other stuff, how you establish yourself in a structure where you can monetize from it?
Yeah, well, I've had my show now for almost 10 years. So part of the ability to monetize it is just based on that longevity. But I'd say we got our first sponsor around, I think I was maybe about 2 or 3 years into the show before I got my first sponsor, and that was a corporate sponsor. It was MailChimp. And what I essentially did, or what you have to do when you're trying to court particular sponsors, if you're not part of like a network or something like that, is you have to build like a profitable case around your show. And so for me, what that involved was doing a survey of our audience to get a sense of their demographic information, age, income, location, etc. So people can kind of know this is the profile that they're buying into for advertising, but also to get a sense of like how many people are listening to episodes, how many people are downloading, etc. I would say, contrary to popular belief, you don't have to have a super popular show to be monetized. And when I say super popular, I would say I feel like right now what a lot of other podcast people will tell you is that you can't really start monetizing until you roughly have about 10,000 downloads per episode, which is nice to have, don't get me wrong, but you can have 1,000 and still be good if you're hitting a specific niche that an advertiser is looking to reach. So part of the thing with monetizing is, finding the right advertiser. I think some people right out the gate will want certain really big companies, and those big companies may not want to deal with a small podcast. They want to do something they want to sponsor something that's going to be worth their investment in it, because they're not going to give a small investment if they were to give an investment. Just to kind of give you an example, with MailChimp, we came in for our first sponsorship roughly at about $3,000 for the year, which is not a lot in hindsight. At the time when we got that, which was I think about 2015, that was more than enough to pay for my editor and to pay for other things for the show, to keep it at the level that it was. But then later on, for example, we got Facebook as a sponsor. And then Facebook is like, well, we won't sponsor for anything less than 25,000. So did I need 25,000? No. Did they give me 25,000? Yes. Did I take 25,000? Absolutely.
Yes.
So it depends on the advertiser and what you have to offer for them through your show. And so that's a really big part about monetizing. I think the general sort of advice, like I said, you'll hear about, is that you have to have a certain 1,000 number of downloads per episode or whatever. And that's not the case. It really is, who is the audience that your particular podcast reaches, and can you illustrate that audience to a potential sponsor? And so with me, that came with doing that survey, putting all that information into a kit along with some like web statistics, some really basic packages like, this is how much it is for one episode. This is how much it is if you want to sponsor for the year. This is how much if you just want a social media mention, et cetera. Like basically give them options to choose from, and then just take it from there. I mean, the worst they can say is no, but somebody eventually will say yes, as long as you keep doing your show. I will say, don't do your show just to get money. Like there are a lot of people I know that want to start a podcast just because they want to try to tap into some money. Like, I'd say the tools now have made it easier than ever to start a show. Like you can start one on Spotify using Anchor or something and like tie it into some type of a monetization model. But will it be enough for you to really transform your show? Or, honestly, will it even be enough for you to go out and eat dinner with? Probably not. Probably not. So it's about just kind of approaching your show and making it into a marketable thing for companies to want to buy into.
Nice.
Now, did someone inform you on what makes it marketable? Like, you seem very knowledgeable, and was that just, through trial and error of doing it? Or did you have someone, I know there's agents out there in entertainment, right? Someone comes to you and says, hey, you could be, or maybe just some sort of expert who came to you and said, hey, you could make this amount of money through sponsors if you set up your podcast to do this, and capture this audience. Or you just learn it, through trial and error?
Well, that's a good question. So nobody taught me, I'll say that. I do have a master's in telecommunications and network management. So I do have like the business sense of how to like run a business, look at profit and loss statements and all that sort of stuff. Not that they necessarily taught me marketing a podcast in grad school, but they teach you about just like marketing in general, like it's supply and demand essentially. Before I did Revision Path, there was another project that I did called the Black Weblog Awards. And I did that from 2004 until I sold it in 2011. And I'd say that was probably where I really first learned about how to put together a profitable sort of kit or something, or a profitable project for people to want to sponsor. Because that was something that a lot of people were interested in and wanted to be a part of. And I honestly, at the time, did not know, like, okay, you want to sponsor us? We'll take, $100, and not really knowing what that meant or what I would put it towards. But it's as I was in grad school and started learning about just business and how businesses are run. That's how that's sort of how it came to me, I guess.
Maurice, you did mention some items that I would like to circle on in a second, but I would like us to just kind of touch base on how you started in the first place. Like, how did you come upon the journey from designer and business person along the way, and still wearing all these hats at the same time?
Where to start? I mean, we'll start in 2005. We'll start there. So that was when I got my first like professional design job. I was working for the state of Georgia as an electronic media specialist. Prior to that, I was basically just doing a lot of customer service jobs. I was working at Auto Trader. I worked at the Opera for like a day doing telemarketing. Like I had like little jobs here and there, nothing really stable, and nothing in design, because to kind of date this was like between 2003, 2005. Not really a lot of jobs for designers, and not really, I would say, a whole lot of programs or ways to learn stuff. Like I was basically learning how to design, I'm using air quotes here, off of like a broken copy of Photoshop that I downloaded from LimeWire or something, and like books from Barnes and Noble that I would go to Barnes and Noble and just like crack the book open and take pictures of them, because I couldn't afford the book. So that was how I kind of taught myself design, and did enough little, like, I wouldn't even call them portfolio pieces, to be honest, but I just did enough playing around with design enough to build a portfolio, which allowed me to get this job that I had in 2005 as an electronic media specialist. So working there with the state of Georgia, I mean, I did a little bit of everything. I was doing web design, graphic design. I did, those big roadside marquees that you see. I would design those, things like that. And also, to completely date myself, I was still using Macromedia software back then. This is prior to Adobe purchasing Macromedia. Like, I put together CDs using Director. We chopped up websites using Fireworks. Like, this is a long time ago. A lot of people might not even remember those programs.
I don't know Fireworks. You lost me on that one.
I remember coming in the industry on the end of Fireworks and the end of Macromedia. Like, those were sunsetting.
We were using Macromedia Dreamweaver at work, and we were using Fireworks.
I remember Dreamweaver.
Yep.
Okay, nice.
So that's kind of how I got started, just doing work for the state of Georgia. Did that for roughly about a year and a half, and then from there I went to WebMD for a short period of time as a web services developer, and that was doing more Photoshop, like, I guess template work is the best way to put it. Basically, we would edit these PSDs and then export them to HTML, and like then there was like this cube farm, and essentially the designers worked on the PSDs, and then we exported them, and then we tossed them over the wall to the other folks who would actually like put it into this this content management system called .NET Nuke. This is a long time ago. So I did that for 6 months as a contract, and then from there started at AT&T as a junior designer, worked my way up to being a senior designer. And then in 2008, I quit that job and started my studio in November 2008, the week that Obama got elected.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was kind of my start, I would say. I mean, that's at least when I started the studio, was 2008. And I'm papering over this by saying I did it for 9 years. I mean, the studio itself is still open. I just don't take design clients anymore. It's more so the umbrella for my creative projects, but I do still do some consulting and things under the umbrella of the studio, but I'm no longer doing like design work under that.
I see.
Okay, so I think that's perfect, because I feel like you kind of touched on the struggle for a lot of creatives who try to transition into business. It's no longer taking design clients, no longer taking video clients, whatever your creative field is, no longer taking the actual clients and doing the work yourself, but consulting and or hiring people to kind of adopt your method and fill in the gaps for you, so you're not on the ground doing all the work. So is that something you experienced, or like how did that work, you not taking design clients anymore?
Yeah, I mean, when I started my studio, it was just me. And I'd say probably for the first 3 to 4 years, it was just myself. And then I hired a virtual assistant. And then it was her and I for about a year. And then that's when I started to actually build a team out. And this was an all remote team, from designers, mostly from the Philippines, but we had a couple that were in the US. Um, and I had a team of 9 designers and developers. So I would basically serve as like the principal creative director. I'm talking with the clients. My virtual assistant is the one that would set up any meetings or would kind of be the project coordinator sometimes also. And then we had the designers and developers that were actually designing and doing the actual like design work. So I would say roughly around 2014, 2015 was when I personally transitioned out of doing the hands-on design and being more of like the studio owner that's overseeing what other people are doing. So when the end of 2017 came along, I was kind of winding the studio down because the market was just changing. When I first started, this was 2008. WordPress was still like, I think, getting its footing, and people were still kind of trying to get into content management systems as a way to make websites and to administer websites. And so for the early parts of the studio work, we did a lot of bespoke WordPress themes. We did MailChimp templates, email marketing, stuff like that. But as the market went on and matured, what you started to see were the growth of these kind of like template-based websites where you could build things on your own, like Squarespace or Wix or something like that. And so because the market was changing that way, we were seeing a decline in the number of people that wanted, a custom WordPress theme. If anything, they wanted like a custom Squarespace theme. And I'm like, we don't really do that. And so as the market was changing, that's when I was like, all right, I feel like the part that I want to do with design is sort of waning. But granted, we were still able to do other sorts of services like consulting and stuff like that. So it just made sense to wind down the design part. And also, design, as you all both know, changes pretty rapidly. When I first started doing design in the 90s, it was all tables. When I worked at AT&T, that's when web design was switching over from tables to CSS. And then I would say right around the time that I stopped designing in my studio, it was switching over from CSS to like Flexbox and like all the other sort of like frameworks and stuff that you see now, like CSS, less frameworks, etc. And so I was sort of like getting out of the game a little bit at that point in terms of hands-on design work.
Right. What would you say was probably, what led to the decision from saying, okay, employee, but now I'm going to start, I opened up my own studio. I started creating my own podcast. Like create from just saying I'm working to I'm going to start doing my own endeavors now and creating my own business and stuff like that. Was there,
I don't know if there was like a specific point. I mean, I think with anyone that has their own business, you quickly realize that you can't do everything yourself. You especially when it comes to like the administrative portion, because that takes you away from doing the actual design work or that you're working on or development work or what have you. And so you try to supplement that by bringing someone in that can do the admin part, so you can focus more on the actual building of things. But if you're really trying to like grow and scale, and you think about what it is that you want to do in your business, you try to find other sorts of byproducts that you can make through your studio. That's not just like the hands-on work of building a thing, right?
Right.
So also during the time when I had my studio, like I taught classes, I made classes, I did consulting, I did podcasting because I had the time to do it since I, at this point, had started to bring on a team. That left me with more time to then focus on, well, what are some other sort of byproducts from the studio that we can create, that we can make, and we can administer that will still kind of pull back into the studio in terms of revenue, But yeah, I wouldn't say there was like a specific vantage point. I think anyone, if they've worked in their business for at least, I would say 2 to 3 years, you start to realize that you need to expand. Like you need to bring someone on so you can honestly just multiply the time that you have to get things done. And when you have that extra time, then you can think, oh, well, you know what? I could do a podcast. I could, I could teach a course. There's other things you see that you can do on top of the work that you're already doing because you've now brought on someone else to handle that work. And like the clients are paying for the actual project itself. So as long as the clients know about it, like it's fine.
Right.
And that process of bringing on somebody, what is that like? Because no one's going to do the work the way you do it, right? So there's kind of like a period of accepting that this is not going to be maybe exactly how I do it, but as long as the customer's satisfied, maybe. So like, what was that transition like, and how do you find people that fit the vision that you've established for your business already?
Well, I think anytime that you bring on someone for your business, whether it's you as an entrepreneur bringing on someone, or if you're an employer bringing on a new person, like every person you hire is a risk. It's not just a risk for whether or not they can do the work to the level that you hope that they can do, that they've maybe expressed during an interview or something, but also like, are they going to be a good person just to work with? So many places talk about culture fit. That's really important at small places because it's like you and this other person. And if you don't like working with the other person, it's like that makes your job even harder. And then you're thinking, well, why am I making this job that I made for myself so hard? A lot of it is just intuition and trust. I mean, I think now, certainly prior to, back when I was hiring for people for my studio, there's a lot of folks out here that can do design. Like there's a lot of people that can do the actual hands-on work, but are they people that you like to work with? Are they people that you can see yourself working with day in, day out? That's important. For my studio, I mean, I put up a want ad. I did it, was it on Craigslist? I'm pretty sure I had one on Craigslist, but then there's also like certain design job boards, like I think Coraflot has a job board, AIGA has a job board. Some of these cost money, some of them are more are free actually. Some of them are. And the reason that I would do it there is because I know that's the audience that I'm trying to reach. If I put it on like Monster or something like that, you'd get everybody just coming out of the woodwork. A more specialized job board is what I use to try to find people. And then you interview them. I would do a paid assignment for people, like a small thing that they would have to do on a project, like maybe take this, Photoshop design and slice it up into a page, and I want to see what the CSS and the HTML and everything look like, stuff like that. I mean, I do that. I can't really say if this is what other folks do because everyone's going to have their own protocol for who they decide they want to work with and the kinds of tasks that they'll be doing. But then you just sort of go from there. I mean, with everyone that I worked with, they were freelance, so everyone was getting like a 1099 or anything. So I want to be clear about, I didn't do anything that had to relate to like W-2s and insurance and stuff like that. Everything is legal and on the up and up, but everybody that worked for the company was a freelancer. They were a freelance contractor.
I would like to circle back on something you said early in the show, which was you sold your award show.
Yeah.
I would like, could you shed a little light on that? Like the beginnings of even creating the awards and then, the growing of it and then ultimately saying, I'm going to sell it. I think a lot of times people may even start a business or start something and not necessarily have an exit plan or exit strategy. They might not even be aware that I can sell this and I'm on to the next venture. A lot of times they may feel like they're stuck with it for life or until it fails, right? And they can't do anything with it anymore.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't have a strategy to sell. I didn't start it with an intent to sell it. But as time went on, and as I got older, I just was like, I don't want to do this anymore, which is fine. I think with every person that creates something, you have to be at some point in time willing to like walk away from it. Right. And whether or not you retain ownership after you walk away from it is completely up to you. But you realize that as you get older, you just have different responsibilities. You have different, just there's different things in your life that you want to devote time to.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Black Weblog Awards, I sold it right around the time I turned 30, and I had spent all of my 20s working on these projects and doing all this stuff, and I was in grad school, and I was like, I'm tired. I'm tired. So I sold it like right before I turned 30, and that's why I sold it, is because I was just tired of doing it. It was still popular. I mean, even after I sold it, it went on for 5 more years. So it was still popular. It had an in-person, the person who I sold it to had turned it into an in-person event with like physical awards, and like celebrities came. So like it went on, it lived on after me. But personally, I was just like, I need a break. I'm done. 2004 was when I initially had the idea to start the Black Weblog Awards. And I didn't really make it a reality until 2005. The reason I wanted to start it is because at the time, blogging was huge. Blogspot, Blogger, I think people were using movable type and stuff. Blogging was a huge thing back then. A lot of people were doing it because, again, this is pre-social media. So everybody and their mother had a blog about something, and it was easy to start one up. And there were some, people that had put together award ceremonies around these blogs. They would say, oh, well, we're going to do like the Weblog Awards, and we're going to announce winners for stuff. And so I saw that there were 2 events like this. One was called the Weblog Awards. The other one was called the Bloggies. And so they would do this every year. They would give out these awards. And I'd noticed Black people weren't being nominated, let alone winning. And I'm like, what's that about? How come we're not getting a part of this? I know we're participating because I know a lot of people that are doing it. And I think the catalyst was seeing one of the Weblog Awards had a category that was like best African or Middle Eastern blog, and everybody was white. And I'm like, okay, that can't be true. I was like, out of all the countries in Africa and all the countries in the Middle East, you found the 5 white people with a blog, and that can't be right. I don't believe that at all. And so that was the catalyst for me starting the Black Weblog Awards. The first year that I did it was the first year I did it, I just did it by email because, again, this is 2005. The types of mechanisms that would exist, and really even the type of technology that would exist to do something like this on a grand scale, really did not exist. Like, I can't stress enough how technology has really grown and changed over like the span of like 15 or 20 years. I mean, back then we were doing like CGI forms with JavaScript. There were no elaborate software solutions that you could just buy a subscription to make some of this stuff happen. You were really just cobbling together whatever you could based off of the programming language at the time. And so the first year I did all the ballots and stuff through email. That was crazy because I couldn't handle all the emails, and my not my internet service provider, but my web host like banned me for a while because they're like, why are you getting so many emails? Are you a spammer? I'm like, no, I'm doing this awards event and what have you. So that was the first year. And then eventually, like the second year, we ended up using this software called Wufoo, built by Chris Coyer, this like web form software. And we used that for a few years. And then eventually we had something custom built by the people behind Black Web 2.0. They custom built us a solution. But it took a while to get to that point. And also the popularity of the awards really like increased every year. Like 2006, it was huge. 2007, NPR picked it up. 2008, NPR continued to pick it up, and they actually took part of the Black Weblog Awards and integrated it into one of their most popular news shows at the time called News and Notes with Farai Chideya. They introduced this Bloggers Roundtable, and that was made up of winners from the Black Weblog Awards. So now these people that were just bloggers now are being put on a national platform where people can hear their thoughts. I'm talking like Baratunde Thurston, Lovey Jones, or Lovey Ajayi Jones, that's her married name now. Afro Bella, a lot of other people, like they started to get this amplification after after they would win an award or something like that. And I mean, we gave them to celebrities too. I think Questlove has one, Kanye has one, Tyra Banks has one. some other folks. I don't remember everybody. This is a while ago, but it grew every year to the point where like I was only doing it during the summer. Like that was when the awards took place, and every summer, I mean, I was hustling, trying to make it work. And like I started grad school in 2006, so I was in grad school from 2006 to 2009. So I'm working full time, and I'm in grad school full time, and I'm doing the Black Weblog Awards. And I quit my job in 2008 to start my studio. The studio allowed me more time to focus on the Black Weblog Awards. And also, I graduated from grad school in 2009, so I had more time. But like, also, I was getting more into my studio. My studio was getting bigger, and I was getting bigger clients and getting bigger projects. And the Black Weblog Awards, as much as I love to do it, was just so tiring. And I had a small staff at the time, and it just got to the point where I needed to let it go. I was like, right now, this is not going to grow any bigger under me, and I'm also tired of doing it. And so I had a friend, Gina McCauley, who lives in Texas, or she lived in Texas at the time, and she had this really popular website called What About Our Daughters that focused on like Black girls. And she had created this event called Blogging While Brown, this conference that she started in 2008 that she initially had in Atlanta, because I worked at the Georgia World Congress Center, which I was able to get that as the venue for the first annual Blogging While Brown conference. So she kept that going every year and like had a venue, had an audience. And I was like, look, do you want the Black Weblog Awards? Because I'll sell it to you. And she bought it, and the rest is history after that with the Black Weblog Awards. I still kind of popped in every year just to kind of give a congratulatory, thing to the nominees and stuff like that. But I had washed my hands of it because by 2011, 2012, I was like, I could focus on my studio. I'm not in school. That was sort of the catalyst for me to start to grow the studio, because I had no other projects and things that I was working on. But the idea for Revision Path was still kind of in the back of my head, because at this time, I'm now owning and operating a design studio. Right. And so I'm talking with designers. I'm like in the design community, and I'm noticing the disparity among like Black studio owners or even Black designers being mentioned in any of the design media that I consume. And I was like, well, there's got to be a podcast or a magazine or something. Initially, Revision Path was going to start as a magazine, as an online magazine. It was going to be modeled after The Great Discontent. And The Great Discontent was this website that had these really great long form interviews and these great photos. And I was like, yeah, I could probably do something similar to that. Maybe not the same quality, but certainly the same level of execution. And that's kind of just how it started. It was initially going to be me and another Black designer that were going to launch it. I forget his name. He goes by, or at least at the time, he went by Zills. Zillz.
Okay.
And we were going to start it together, and then like at the last minute he pulled out, and so then I just went ahead and launched it, because at this point I had bought the domain name and started making graphics and stuff for it. So I was like, I'll just launch it myself. And so that's how Revision Path ended up being born. At first as like an online magazine, really just a blog. And then roughly about, I would say 3 to 4 months in from starting it is when I recorded the first podcast episode, which initially was never the goal of Revision Path at that point to be a podcast. It was just going to be a magazine. But this person from Chicago, she had read the magazine and was like, I really love it. I'm going to be in Atlanta. I was wondering if you wanted to record a podcast. And I didn't have any gear. I didn't have any microphones or anything like that. I had been podcasting before. I had a history with podcasting that started back in like 2005, but I didn't have any gear or anything to record. So we just like recorded it on my phone at the time, my horrible phone at the time, because it had a microphone and I could record audio. And that's how we did the first episode at a restaurant here in Atlanta. And eventually I upgraded my, microphone and everything. But that's how it started.
Okay. Wow. Well, before we talk about the podcast, I just want to talk about how when you sold your awards show, That's funny is that you just said, hey, you want to buy it? And that was it, right? Because, Sean, I remember when we did our book review on Built to Sell.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. Yeah, I was thinking, that's and how many creatives start a creative venture and then when they're done with it, it's just done and it just sits there and there's no there's no equity built, there's no selling it for something later on to still make profit off it. It's just like, all right, I was in this for 4 years and now it's gone. So you really you monetized it even though you weren't working on it anymore. So that's brilliant.
Yeah. And I still, was sort of associated with it throughout the year. So I kind of had that, I guess, social proof attached to it that people knew that I was behind it. But yeah, once I sold it and she started running it, I was like, great, I can focus on something else.
Nice. And I think I'm noticing like a theme with your ventures, right? Like you're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not like you're necessarily trying to find what's the next hot thing or a new thing. A lot of these ventures seem to come from a place of you just having an interest or passion or noticing that, something that you would desire is not necessarily there. And then you kind of go and do it. Is that a fair assessment or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be someone that could look at the market and see like, oh, here's a void and I could possibly fill it. But would I be interested in it? Probably not. I mean, I still have other passion projects now that I want to do that I will get to eventually. It may not happen right away, but there's time. And certainly I think as I do more of these types of projects, that just increases my overall visibility. So when I do start these other projects, they won't necessarily start from zero. They can start at least with some level of a platform or an audience because people know that I'm capable of doing this type of project work. And so I can launch it hopefully with some level of support already behind it.
And I think incidentally, just based on hearing you talk and hearing how you kind of got to some of the businesses you started, even if you're not intentionally like, this is a new trend, I'm going to go jump on it. I think you just have that brain and have that mind where you recognize the trends and you're gravitating towards some of those things because you start, like you're right about blogs. Like that was the time where all hip hop, all of them, that was just the wave. And you decided to jump on that and create a platform that in turn was valuable and you were able to sell that. So
yeah. And now it's funny because Revision Path now surpasses what I've done with the Black Weblog Awards. I think because of the general, I guess, ephemeral nature of the internet. Like most of that stuff is gone. Like it's gone. Like the new version of the awards that started in 2011 and went on, I think there's probably still vestiges of that around somewhere maybe, but like because the internet has moved so fast and things kind of go at such a rapid speed with the outpacing of technology and just the way that culture changes and the way that our tools are changing and growing, like a lot of the projects I do have they seem like they have a pretty short shelf life. Like you start something on the internet, hopefully it lives for a few years, you move on to the next thing. Like that's kind of just how the web, at least right now, I feel like that's how it works. The web, or really I'd say the internet, not so much, well, I guess you could say the web and the internet being two separate things, but it was never really meant to be an archive. It was never meant for that sort of purpose. And so, yeah, I did this great work and it might exist out there somewhere, bits and pieces of it, but it is what it is. Either you were there or you weren't there to kind of experience it.
Right. So Revision Path, right? I know you have a lot of other projects and things that you have started and worked on, but would you say like right now this is like the most, most prominent or most, has it gotten you the most, I don't even know, the most recognition or opportunities? Because this has been going on for a while now, right? Like,
yeah, it'll be 10 years next year. I would say it has. Yeah. I mean, the thing with the Black Weblog Awards, and I would say the reason that it didn't take off as much as I wanted it to, two reasons. One, it was it was just a different time on the internet back then. Like it was just a different time in general, and especially once Obama started running for president. it became a lot harder for me to push the Black Weblog Awards as an idea because folks were bringing up this whole thing about the world being post-racial.
Post-racial.
And so if you focused on anything in one particular like ethnic or racial aspect, you were being racist. And I'm like, oh, that's not how it works.
I don't think that's how that works.
None of this works. And so because of that, at least initially back then, it was hard to kind of, sort of get traction for it.
Right.
And so it never, I mean, like NPR picked it up and I think that's great, but I don't even think NPR would say like, oh yeah, we got this from the Black Weblog Awards, although they totally got it from the Black Weblog Awards, even though like the show doesn't exist anymore, that they were using news and notes and whatnot. But I'd say Revision Path is probably the biggest because one, we've managed to connect ourselves with a lot of really big companies that are in tech and design. Like every major company, Microsoft, Apple, whomever, we've probably had someone from their company on the show, so I have a connection. And two, because it's now part of the Smithsonian's archives, that opens up the show to a much larger audience than I think it had been before. Certainly we get like a lot more students now. Like I know that Revision Path is taught in a couple of schools nationally and internationally, but now that it's part of the Smithsonian, like I get student emails all the time about, can I talk to you about this, or can I interview you for that, or something like that. So I'm getting the show now to be a part of design canon, like design history. And so because I'm pushing it towards that arena, I'd say it's probably the biggest thing I've done so far.
Nice. And are all your episodes archived in the museum, or is it?
Not all of them. So only 11 of them are archived right now, and that was a selection that they put together in 2019. I had been talking with them about possibly doing more, but it's a long process. The pandemic has only made that a much longer process. So I don't know when or if there will be another selection of episodes in the museum, because it takes a lot to get them in there. Like just to kind of give you an example, it took me 4 years to get those 11 episodes in.
Wow.
So it's not it's not as simple as being like, here's an email, 11
put that
MP3s
in. Here's the
are
MP3. Archive this MP3.
It's a whole process. They have to obtain what they call museum use rights. And so for every person that I've had on the show, for example, they have to reach out to them personally, ask them about their involvement, corroborate, and make sure that it happened, when it happened, get their permission, And like some people who have been on the show have passed on, or they no longer work in design or what have you. So like sometimes it can be a little tricky. But it took 4 years to get these 11 episodes in. And so if they decide to bring more in, I hope it'll be a much speedier process. But but right now, what's in there is what's in there, and I'm happy for that.
No, that's what's up. I mean, I was wondering why I didn't get an email yet, but for my episode, but no.
Well, the other thing is they chose the episodes. I didn't choose them.
Oh,
so they went through, and at the time when they chose them, this was in. Let's see. I first pitched it to them in 2015. They came back to me, I think, around like 2017, I think.
Wow.
And at that time, I was like right around 250 episodes or so. So like half of where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And so they chose from that. And they're like, yeah, we think these episodes would be great to be in the museum. And they gave their reasons why. And I was like, okay.
Okay, no, good deal.
So anything after episode 250 that's not true. Episode 300 is in the show, is in the Smithsonian, and that's only because, honestly, at the time, Black Panther had just come out, and if anyone had visited the museum during that year, they knew how much Black Panther stuff was in the museum, like movie stuff, like
costume.
Even if you go in the gift shop and everything.
Yeah.
So the fact that I had the someone from the movie itself as the 300th episode, they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll take that one too."
Nice.
Like
give me that. Give me that.
Sort of like when you go to the grocery store shopping and you're in the checkout line and you just like grab a candy bar or something. That's how they were. They were like, yeah, this is what I want.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna switch topics just a bit because I know we're running on time a bit and don't want to rush you. But I would like to talk about the writing projects, the books and the things that you have worked on. You've talked about doing an online magazine. That was the initial iteration of Revision Path, and then but on top of that, you have worked on books. Can you speak to that? The books that you have worked on.
Yeah, so I've written some essays and have been interviewed and such for three books. One is from Andrea Pippins, and it's titled, I'm forgetting the title. It's We Something. I forgot
we'll
the
find
title.
it
I
and
should
put
have
it in
added
the
up
notes
beforehand. But one was a book by Andrea Pippins. The second book was Extra Bold, which is like this. I think they're calling it like a feminist design manual or something like that. I'm completely butchering this, by the way.
No, we'll put it in the notes. We'll put the titles. We'll put the
because I can't recall off the top of my head.
All
but
good,
the most
all
recent
good.
one is the one that came out earlier this year in 2022, which is the Black Experience in Design. And I wrote an essay there about Revision Path. So I'm in those. Also, just through Revision Path for 3 years, we did this. It's like I'll call it a design literary journal called Recognize. And the goal of Recognize was to kind of uncover the next generation of design writers, which are, in my eyes, like people of color. Like, where are they? And, this is sort of built one off of the legacy of Stephen Heller. I won the Stephen Heller Prize back in 2018 for the work that I did with Revision Path. But even now, when you look at a lot of design writers, like it's rare to find a Black design writer. When you do see Black design being talked about, it's usually in the realm of fashion or maybe interior design or something, but not about like web design, graphic design, etc. You just don't find those design writers anywhere. And so what I wanted to do was try to help cultivate that next generation of those designers through that project. So we did it for 3 years. Roughly what it boiled down to was people would submit for a specific theme. So we would have a different theme each year. And people would submit, just submit our essays to that theme, 3,000 words or less. And then we would choose the ones that we thought were the best. We'd get them polished and ready to publish, and we would publish them. The first year we partnered with Envision. And so we had 6 essays that we ran inside their blog called, forget what their blog is called, but we ran them in tandem with their blog.
Right.
And then the second year, we only had 4. No, we had 2, my bad. We had 2 essays the second year, and we ran those with A List Apart, which is a well-known web magazine from Jeffrey Zeldman.
Right.
And we wanted to do it for the third year, but I think what ended up happening with the pandemic, it just kind of killed the momentum for the project. Like, people were not interested in writing stuff. We got people that just submitted a lot of designs, and I'm like, no, you have to actually write something. So we just ended up kind of winding it down. I still want to bring it back one day because I do think it's important to try to cultivate that next generation, because even though we don't have a lot of design magazines out there, I still think it's important for designers to be able to write and document their craft, because no one else is going to do it. And even with what I do with Revision Path, I try to impress that upon the guests, not just about writing, but just about document your process in some sort of way. So, the future can know about what it is that you do,
Very much so. But this has been very enlightening and fun. Sean, do you have any questions or any other items you would like to ask Maurice?
I mean, only one thing. I just kind of want to circle back to how we started, and you mentioned like currently you're on unemployment, and you're not necessarily employed by a company. The initial
you make me sound like I'm broke.
Well, exactly. I'm trying to because I did that similarly maybe 2 years ago, and that really set me up for things in the future. And then it was an even better situation because that was around the COVID time for the context of those listeners. So this was when we were getting Trump checks, as they called them. So strategically, we understand sometimes it makes sense if you're, especially in the freelance world, to file for unemployment. So That's what I was trying to clarify. So if you could set that up for us, for our for the listeners who maybe not as aware of how to take advantage of the unemployment system when you're a freelancer, let us know like how you got to that decision and how you figured out things like that in your path.
I mean, I don't know how it is in other states. So like what I say, take it with a grain of salt. I live in Georgia. I mean, I was working a full-time job and paying into the state. So the unemployment money that I'm getting back is my money. Like that's the money I put into the state. It's for that purpose. So I'm getting that money back, however much money they give every week. But you still have to claim it. Like you have to be actively looking for work. You have to put in, I think, at least 3 jobs. Like you have to apply for at least 3 jobs a week so they can see that you are actively looking for work. And then every week when you claim it, you have to tell them like, no, I did not refuse any work, that sort of thing. So it's a process in order to claim it every week. That's the process in Georgia. I do not know if that process is the same nationwide. I'm pretty sure it varies state by state. So, but the money that I'm getting, I mean, it is because of money that I paid into at the places where I worked at full time. So that's my money.
Got it. I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense. Exactly. Because
I think sometimes, just to kind of piggyback off that, I think sometimes there can be some shame associated with like filing for public services. Like I've been on food stamps. I filed for unemployment because that's money that I've paid into the system. It is colloquially called welfare, but it is a public support system. We pay into it with our tax dollars. So when you're unemployed and you need that, you tap into it because it's your money. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that to like push back on you asking the question, but I want to like impress that upon people because I know, especially when I was younger, there would be people that would be so ashamed of like even the thought of doing that. And I'm like, it's your money.
Right.
That money that comes out of your check for taxes doesn't just vanish into thin air. It goes into a public support system. And now that you're no longer able to pay into that, you can take advantage of that public support system until you get back on your feet.
No, that is
thank you. Yeah, that's exactly
that's it.
Exactly what we're looking for. Yeah.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
And I'll end it. Well, not end it, but I will also add to the note, especially when we're speaking in the realm of entrepreneurs and business owners and starting your business. There's probably a lot of people that wouldn't even want to own up to that or consider that. Right.
Right. But I mean, I have to be clear. Like when I say that, like you still have to, you still have to file for unemployment. Right. So it's not a given.
Well, of course.
Like if you've never worked a job and paid into the system and you try to file for unemployment, you probably won't be accepted.
Right.
Like they won't accept your claim. Or if they do, you may get very little money just based off of that. So it is predicated upon the point that you have actually worked and paid into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Maurice. Now, as we're wrapping up, anything you want to talk about, promote, plug, anything you want to speak on, any parting words of wisdom?
I'd say the biggest things. I mean, there's a couple of things. One, cultural algorithms, as I mentioned, that's the company that I co-own with my friend Tori. We are hopefully coming out with our first podcast. I think possibly early next year, early 2023. We're looking at it like. We've already got the pilot. We've got the first episode. It's just a matter at this point of like design and marketing. So be on the lookout for that. You can find more information once we have it available at cultalgo.com, cultalgo.com.
Okay.
I'm currently working on a book with Gail Anderson and Michelle Washington. So that's something that we've been working on that throughout the pandemic, but it's now at the point where they've both mentioned it, so now I can mention it. Nice. But we're working on a book that hopefully will be coming out. I hope it comes out sometime next year, probably late next year, but we've been working on it, pulling things together. It's going to be about the history of Black graphic designers and stuff, so it should be pretty cool.
Nice, very nice.
And then I personally am working on a book about Revision Path. It's kind of part autobiography, part the story of Revision Path, and so I don't know when that's coming out because that's been a journey. So it's something that I'm working on, but I will definitely be able to share more once I'm closer to the finish line. Let's just say I'm like somewhere in the middle with trying to pull everything together.
Okay. Keep him busy, sir. Keep him busy. All right. Well, Maurice, pleasure having the show. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your, spreading the word of your wisdom and your journey with our audience, and just showing folks in the creative field and in all fields, that there are multiple opportunities and options in this business game.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me once again.
Yes, sir. So that's a wrap for this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Maurice. Hopefully it provided you with some value as you navigate through your business journey and personal life. As always, if you have a question you would like us to answer on the show, shoot us a message on any of our social media channels or shoot us an email at questions@businessgrindshow.com. Always don't forget to subscribe and share on Spotify and iTunes. See you again soon. In the meantime, keep grinding.
The Business Grind is for entertainment purposes. Opinions expressed are those solely of the host and guests. Please consult with a professional and exercise discretion before engaging in any business endeavors.
I'm out here on the grind. I'm out here on the grind.